Real, raw, and unfiltered rags to riches stories from amazing human beings around the world with emphasis on life, personal development, family tech, and marketing. Of course, I'm your host, Ivan Temelkov, and today joining me on this episode is Stephanie Jameson. Hello.
Hello. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on.
Likewise, likewise. Before we jump into a convo with Stephanie, I want to give the viewers and listeners a little bit of a preface about Stephanie, who is an intuitive empath, psychic medium, and two-time Amazon best-selling author. She works with people around the world daily who find themselves being moved through an awakening experience. She also helps others connect with themselves, spirit, all while encouraging them to choose love over fear. I love that. Love over fear.
Yeah,
And
that's my main message.
that's a powerful message. And the reason I said that is I think it was last year, someone that I had talked to told me that fear is actually self-induced. And it really got me thinking. I'm like, because there was a part in my life where I lived in fear. And the more I thought about it now, being an entrepreneur and risk taker, having sacrificed a lot, I got in my head and I got to thinking, I'm like, fear really is self-induced because it's almost like anxiety. You're trying to predict something that may or may not happen. Right. And you're afraid of it to the point to where you become so afraid that as opposed to becoming more proactive, you become more reactive. In everything you do in life and in business. But we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. Let's start with your story, where you've been, what you've seen. Let's talk about your younger years and how did you get into everything that you're doing now? Because it's really fascinating.
Thank you. So I'm an intuitive empath, psychic medium, been a sensitive kid. I was sensitive my entire life, always felt totally different. I was the kid who always tried to blend in and failed miserably every time. That was me. It didn't matter. It was like, I always wanted to be like these people or like these people or like these people because I knew I was different, And so the entire growing up phase of my life, it was like trying to blend in. And then one day when I hit my teen years, I started realizing that not only was I already picking up on spirit and subtle energies around me, I actually had an experience where I was like, okay, I felt different for a reason. Tried to suppress that a little bit. And then as I grew into my early 20s, it got louder and louder. And then when I hit the age of 33, I went through a massive spiritual awakening. And when I went through my first, I like to call it an initiation period, when I went through that first shift in consciousness, everything changed and the chapters of my life began to make sense. And I realized that I kind of had to experience some of this stuff that I did, some of the trauma, all of that so that I could come into alignment with my purpose.
Yeah.
And I realized that choosing love over fear was a experience that I chose fear over love for a very long time. And I started realizing that I was here to teach other people how to reprogram, upgrade, trust their intuition, and choose love over fear.
One thing that I wanted to touch upon before my train of thought runs away is you said different. I want to latch upon that because, as an Eastern European, as an immigrant, let's just say that I'm very different. I think I will be for probably the rest of my life. My kids will probably be treated differently. I think mainly from like a cultural aspect, but I remember a time when I was different personally. I didn't know how to speak any English, bullied all through high school. There were some very dark times in my life that still sometimes send flashbacks, but you said different. This is why I wanted to touch upon this because I want to hear more about this because you said at a young age, you realized that you were different when you were starting to pick up on spirits. And I mean, you just know, right? Like you know inside of yourself that you have a different perspective, different feelings on the outside world. You interpret things differently than everybody else. And then, so how did that make you feel? How did you
like an outsider, I felt like there was something wrong with me, I remember being about 6 years old and taking a bath and just being a typical kid playing with my toys in the bath. And I remember having this moment of like knowing someone was standing next to me and almost observing me. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, oh, I'm safe. I'm good. I'm just here for a quick little whatnot. I'm here to, just come back. It was like I knew I was just coming back for an experience. And as I grew, I really challenged the adults around me because I was always that kid that was like, but why does it have to be done this way? That seems silly. Specifically when it came to religion, because I was like, why are we being taught to fear God? Why are we being taught to do this? And if God made me this way, then why am I not perfect? Why am I not perfect as that? And I remember really challenging people as I was growing up, going, but if I am God, if I have if I've got God in my heart, why would it matter what my heart is telling me to do? And it really triggered people around me because they were like, no, you're supposed to look outside of yourself for all the validation. And I was just like, no, I know all the answers. And I remember that really being an issue for my parents who came from a very, one of my parents coming from a very strict Catholic background. Mm-hmm. I was raised Catholic, but I challenged conditioned beliefs from a very young age. And I always felt like, I remember my grandmother saying to me, you may be 7 or 8 years old, but I feel like I'm talking to an 85-year-old woman here. Wow. Because I would make my grandmother think. Yeah. And it should be the other way around. Right. And then same thing with my father. I remember having these really in-depth conversations with my father when I was 10 years old going, I feel this, and him just kind of looking at me and just kind of smiling and shaking his head and that, Yeah. And then on top of all that, I felt energy. I could tell if something was about to happen, and it brought me into a place of feeling nervous, especially if I was picking up on something that, I wouldn't have thought was going to be good at the time. Mm-hmm. And so it just made me a really anxious kid. I developed a lot of anxiety, and it was a challenge for me. I could pick up on what other kids in the class were thinking, feeling. Lights were an issue for me. I do not do well with lights, like big white lights. Yeah. And as I grew older, I started realizing, oh, wow, I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive in all the ways. I'm a feeler. I'm super emotional, but it's not that I'm this anxiety-ridden person. It's that I'm here to teach people to feel first and then think and act. And that was not the case growing up or anybody around me. So, I felt like an old person when I was a kid.
Wow. So, that is, when you're so young, it's like you said, as opposed to it being the other way around, where the adults around you look up to them because, they're a lot more mature. At least that's the traditional, teachings that we have in society, is that we look up to older people because they're a lot more seasoned, a lot more experienced, I should say. But you were at a very young age, you just had something inside of you that was so powerful. So how did you make sense of that? Like, how did you, because you were an outsider, how did you interpret it? How did you react to it?
I felt like there was something wrong with me, and I tried to blend in for a really long time. I didn't know how to interpret it. In fact, when I would go and talk to, I was raised by my father and my stepmother, and when I would mention certain things, it was hushed. We didn't talk about that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't until I actually kind of broke away and, became my own person that I started realizing there's something to this. And I had to get in touch with my own vibration. And the more I got in touch with my own vibration, honored my own heart, listened to what it was like all of the pieces of the puzzle started to make sense. Yeah. But it took a while. It took a long while. But I'm known as what is called a intuitive dreamer. So from the time I was a really young kid, I would have conversations with people who had passed, or I would have these things where my mother in particular, she always used to tell me, she'd be like, your dreams freak me out, girl. Because I would say, hey, Mom, I had a dream about this. And then it would happen 2-3 days later. So I just want to let you know. But it stopped there. I kind of stopped it there because I'm a very logical person. I'm very analytical. Right. I'd just be like, oh, well, I have crazy dreams. But as I grew into my early 20s, people in my family would be like, Stephanie, there's something, I think, to your dreams because, your dreams tend to come true. I could pinpoint where something was lost.
Yeah.
I could pinpoint what was going to happen. I saved my mom's dogs from getting attacked by a big black snake in her yard.
Oh, wow.
And I said, Mom, you need to be careful, because I had a dream there's a big black snake. She called me up 2 days later. Oh my gosh, Stephanie. I knew that my sister was going to get pregnant, and then I just got quieter, incorporated daily meditation into my adult years. And the more I did that, and the more I trusted in what I felt and not allowed what everyone else, what they thought to affect me, I was able to hear spirit more clearly.
One thing that you said that is a really good point to talk about here, whether it's in life or in business, entrepreneurship. There's a lot of dreamers and go-getters that listen to the show. A lot of people that, have dreams, or they're trying to fulfill their dreams, or are working on themselves to become a better version of themselves. And one thing that you said is, I think there's not enough empowerment in society now that encourages people to be unique and authentic. And let's just face it, authentic, I feel like it's such a washed out word because everybody claims to be authentic, but it's true, because what you were saying is that, you thought there was something wrong with you, and that can be degrading to a person, especially at such a young age, because what happens is treatments, there's something wrong with you, medication, because you're not normal.
Yeah.
That's how society says.
I was actually told that when I was a kid. Those words
really
out of my out of a parental figure's mouth. Mm-hmm.
That is insane. And the reason I mention this is because, I'm a father, and I get to thinking, one of the things that I want to empower my kids to do personally is just to be themselves, regardless of what society tells them to do, because we do need more innovative and unique people in the world, people that have powerful gifts like you do. But that's frowned upon in society because it's abnormal. And I feel like our society wants to live in normal because normal is comfortable. Normal is not abnormal. Normal is typical.
And that's exactly what I do today is I get people to feel. I really do have a gift. I was doing a recent interview with somebody, and she said to me, you have a gift to get people to actually reconnect with themselves and to follow their heart and trust in what it is that they're feeling. And I thanked her, and I said, that's come from years of learning how to do that myself.
Yeah.
So that's huge to me. And that's something that I feel very, very strongly about. I work with sensitive kids. There's a lot of sensitive kids out there like myself who are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD or something else, and they're heavily medicated, when in all reality, they're just suffering from a lack of grounding because they're more energetically sensitive than the parents, and the parents don't know how to handle it. And the parents are living in fear. They're living in worry, anxiety, doubt, stress, anger, resentment, whatever. They don't know how to deal with such a love-based kid because love and fear don't live in the same place. So they try to put their kids in a box, and unfortunately it causes issues like what I grew up with.
Yeah. Another great point that you just made is that I think in modern society, there's a continuous struggle for delineation to be able to create a clear distinction of the extraordinary and ordinary people, because you definitely fall in that extraordinary category, someone that has, immense capabilities and gifts that you were given, but modern society sees that as abnormal. So they don't know how to treat it. I feel like a lot of people are afraid of that. And what's really interesting that you said is one of your clients told you that you have a way of helping people connect with themselves emotionally, like really digging deep into their heart and soul to realize that, maybe you've been brainwashed by society and you forgot to act for yourself, to be yourself. Yeah. Because I know, similar to what you said, all my high school days, I was bullied for 4 years, all my high school. And I remember like how much anger I had after that. And during even high school, how much I wanted to blend in, how much I wanted to be like everybody else, and I was very talented at the time. I mean, I was very, athletic, and I could do different things, but you know what? I didn't think for myself. I was afraid to be And most people I think, are afraid to be the lone wolf.
Well, everybody's conditioned to look outside of themselves for validation. And that
Mm-hmm.
continues into our relationships as we grow older,
Yeah.
right? I can't tell you how many times I gave my power away to
Yeah.
someone else because my intuitive hit was telling me this, but it wasn't logical to someone else. And so I didn't take action on my idea or my divinely inspired guidance, right?
Yeah.
So I totally understand that.
So at what point, I mean, you were very young when you discovered these gifts that you had, and obviously it took you some time to try to rationalize it, make sense of it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you went through a lot of different challenges. I mean, I'd love to hear, I know, like you said, you had some diagnoses where people were probably telling you, you're crazy because you're abnormal, or some version of that, right?
Yeah. What I was taught was there was no diagnosis, but I do have PTSD because I do come from a very child abuse background. So,
Okay.
that's something I was actually in a foster home by the time I was 17. And it was when I was in my foster home and I was
Okay.
away from that really toxic experience that I was able to get in tune with my own vibration. And that's when I had the experience. And the first experience was seeing my grandfather show up at the end of my bed when I was 17. I was going through something really, really traumatic, very emotional,
Mm-hmm.
and I was asking for guidance. And boom, he was right there at the end of my bed. And it was like
Wow.
all of a sudden, just boom, boom, boom. It was like, yep, I am in tune. Keep going. Keep trusting what you're feeling. I called my mother and I said,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to believe what just happened. And my mother just sat there and listened to me. And it just kind of grew from there. By the time I was 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, these dreams were just hitting me hard. And I was able to do what I was telling you earlier. But then I suppressed it because I started a business. I got married. I did all the practical, logical things I needed to do in life. And I went into stress, just like everyone else, right? And so when you're in stress mode, you can't really access what it is that spirit's telling you to do, or you just suppress it. You're like, I'll deal with that later, right?
Yeah.
So it was incorporating daily meditation into my life. Around 22, 23 years old, I sat down and I started meditating. And I started noticing really cool things that were happening to my physical body. I was starting to notice that my hands would tingle. I started noticing little things at the top of my head. I was feeling my way through experiences versus seeing. I would close my eyes and I would open my heart. And one of the most transformational experiences I ever had during meditation was I saw JC. I saw Jesus Christ. And it was just like, boom, right there. I saw the Sacred Heart. And I remember how bright those eyes were, those beautiful green, blue eyes. And I just remember being like, whoa. And when I did that, I remember I kind of fell back a little bit and I started crying because I had fought traditional conditioned beliefs for such a long time that I was like, the church? I don't think so. Right.
Yeah.
But then I started to do some more homework around the subject. And I realized right then and there that JC is all about the wisdom of the Sacred Heart and emotions and connecting with yourself. And he was just a normal man who understood his divinity. And as I started to understand my divinity and that I was here for a reason, that I was here for a purpose, I started realizing that I'm here to help other people understand their divinity and understand the power and the blueprint of their own heart. And when they listen to their heart and they choose love, which is hope, contentment, joy, gratitude over that worry, anxiety, doubt, guilt, whatever it is that they're feeling, they are aligned with what it is that them as a soul are supposed to experience.
That is wow. So I'm curious to know, the first time when you saw your grandfather, when you were asking for guidance, as you mentioned, what did that feel like afterwards? Were you turning to others to find answers and meaning to what you just experienced, or were you like on your own pursuit for self-interpretation?
I was on my own.
Wow.
There was no one around me who understood what I was going through. I was dating somebody who I was very much in love with at the time, my first love. And I would tell him, I would say, this is what I'm experiencing. He was very open and he would listen to me and he would say, that's normal. He was actually probably the only person at that time in my life going, yeah, your experience, that's normal. You need to keep honing in on those gifts. That's okay for you to be experiencing that. And then it wasn't until I got older, into my 20s, that I met another very intuitive soul, and he encouraged me for a very long time. And when I finally figured out who and what I am, I remember going back to him, and he winked at me and he said, "I've been waiting for you to figure this out." And he was like, those who bear the brightest lights have the most stones thrown at them. He said, "Welcome to my world." And from that moment on, just kind of took off. And I was like, no wonder I've been attracted to intuitives, healers, holistic healing, ancient teachings, all that weird stuff. I'm here to help other people who are on that path as well.
Yeah, that's extremely powerful. One thing I wanted to allude upon that you said is just that, I'm going to butcher it, but you said those who are in pursuit of the brightest light, I think you said, have the most.
Those who bear the brightest lights have the most stones thrown at them.
Well, that was Jesus Christ, basically. That was him, because stones were thrown at him. He carried the cross and he buried the burdens of all of humanity, and humanity still to this day fails to understand that. But that is so powerful right there that you said, because I know personally that has probably been a journey of mine, at least over the last 5 or 6 years, always trying to strive to get closer with myself, to be a better person, to be more giving, to impact the world and leave it better than how I came into it. And I know I've barely just started. I'm 41 years old, and I feel like my life just started, honestly, like a few years ago, becoming a father and all of that. But I want to segue into talking about, you're a 2-time Amazon best-selling author. I want to hear a little bit about what inspired you, around writing and becoming an author. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I never dreamed about being an author. And I always feel a little bit guilty saying that, because I know that there's so many beautiful writers out there who it's their dream to just get their book published. But that's not how it was for me. For me, it was when I went through a very, very heartbreaking divorce a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I went through my awakening. I started meditating even more so. And I just started journaling everything that I was experiencing during my awakening process. And when I would meditate, I would write down everything that I was seeing. And then I would spend time looking up and researching what some of that stuff meant. And what I realized that I was experiencing was, it was Spirit's way of letting me know what my signs and my interpretations were, so that when the time came for me to start standing in my authenticity and doing what I do for a living now, I knew how to interpret when, for example, somebody's father has passed. I knew how to get those messages across to them, right?
Yeah.
And so what I did was I just wrote this all down. Well, during this process was this huge self-discovery that I am an empath. And I totally identify with that term, an intuitive empath. And so I just started writing down all the things that I had learned and all this. And then what happened was I just kind of hopped onto Instagram, and I started building a little bit of a community over there. And as I did this, I was met with somebody who said, "I am so-and-so with this particular publishing company, and I would really like the opportunity to offer you a book deal."
Yeah.
And for me, it felt more so like a little wink from the universe, letting me know that I was on the right path. And so I took the book deal, and it became an Amazon bestseller for personal transformation and spirituality. And then just about a year later, they offered me an affirmation book deal. And what was so funny to me about that was, I had been writing and reprogramming my mindset all on my own. And I had been writing down all of my affirmations in a book. And she came up to me and she said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing some sort of mindset shifting book for us?" And that's how my second book was born. And so really it came from journaling. And I spent a lot of time alone. This is something that I feel like a lot of people are scared to do, especially as they go through the awakening process. And so through spending time alone and getting in touch with my own vibration, I felt like I was almost channeling. I was just channeling this information that was just coming out of me. And I was like, where is this coming from? I wrote it all down. By the end of it, I had 6 journals, and those 6 journals turned into 2 books.
Wow. Congratulations on that. And actually, as you were sharing that, and how that experience, that entire experience and how it really came to you, because I think you had sort of a misconception of authorship until you kind of got into it. But you said it very well, because I think authors are really just storytellers. They're people who are, because I think in the traditional world, people think as authors as someone that, they've done something fascinating, they've accomplished something, but I think it's kind of lost its true meaning of being an author, which is really telling a powerful story behind actual experiences that you went through. And I personally think
those 2 books are my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the name of the books, by the way?
So the first book is the Happy Empaths Workbook, and it's just a book that's designed for energetically sensitive people like myself, so they can figure out who the hell they really are. That's really what it is. So it's everything that I went through from childhood through today, and I combine the spirituality with the science. So if you have someone who's like, I'm super logical and I don't know about all this, I've got all the science in my first book to back up energetic, biofields and the heart math and all of that stuff behind the science of empathy and the science of intuitives and empaths. And then my second book is the Happy Empaths Little Book of Affirmations. And that's for people who are like myself or who are going through an awakening, sensitive souls who need to really upgrade their mindset. And it's designed kind of like a little oracle book. So basically you flip the book open and whatever it is that you're needing to hear at that moment, boom, it's right there. And you just start saying that affirmation to yourself over and over and over again until you believe it. And that one has done even better than my first book. A lot of people are loving that. I have a lot of men, which surprised me, loving that book, loving it.
It's really interesting you said a lot of men, because just to share a little bit of a story that's totally related to what you said is, so every week I work out with a group of guys, and they're business owners, entrepreneurs, very heartfelt individuals. And one of the guys actually put a post on Facebook, basically highlighting his sponsor. So I think he's an ex-alcoholic, and but he also struggled through his life of finding that affection, I think, from a male to male perspective, because the sponsor is a male. It's an older gentleman who, for a period of 10 years, he said, this is the only guy I've ever connected with, and what you just said, I think is really important, is because I think females, especially female entrepreneurs, do a much better job at extracting their feelings and emotions and actually sharing them than males do. I think it might be kind of like an ego thing. And so I'm not surprised that the book has done so well with males, is because we're human beings too. We have emotions and feelings. And I will tell you what, I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, was the first time that I actually cried. And I wasn't, growing up, I wasn't taught that. I was taught that it was a weakness, and the reason that happened is because I was letting out emotions and feelings and things that I was going through and challenges. And it felt like it was me against the world. Yeah. I felt like I was the only person that I could find answers to. And so now that you're saying this, I think there is a lot of men out there who, are afraid. And I think a lot of it may have to do with fear of judgment, because I know with men, it's fear of judgment that we struggle, because we're worried about being judged, because let's face it. I mean, not to be chauvinistic here, but we live in a very male-driven world. Entrepreneurship
We live in a very patriarchal world. But exactly. That's the funny thing. People like myself who embody the divine feminine are uprising.
I love that.
Teaching people consistently that the divine feminine and the divine masculine are to be in balance. The divine feminine is the heart. The divine masculine is the mind. This goes all the way back to Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ, Isis and Osiris. The two have to be in balance in order for you to create, right? And in order for you to manifest and to create the things that you're desiring, you have to be at a place called 0 point, which is the point of creation, which is when you finally trust your heart enough and you follow your heart, you surrender, which so many people go through during the awakening process, and you start training that mind to be the tool that it actually is, because that's all that it is. So the divine feminine is the creator. The divine masculine can create, but it's about surrendering to her wisdom consistently. And that's why you're seeing this huge awakening happening on this planet. There's a huge, fear versus love consciousness awakening that's happening here, and COVID is just the tip of the iceberg on that one. COVID's making people have to face things about themselves that they never wanted to face,
Yeah, that is so ironic that you said that. There's a few things in there that I wanted to touch upon. Is so at one point in my life, so when you were talking about fear versus love, is so I'm married for a second time. My first marriage was a total fucking failure. It was, imagine waking up every day and your partner telling you that you're a failure, that you won't amount to anything. And that's literally how I felt for 10 years.
But was it a failure, or what did you learn?
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. It was a failure, but I also learned from it, because I learned how to move on, and I learned that I had more to me that I was yet to extrapolate. And I was afraid of doing that because I was so worried about an affirmation from someone else. Right. And I've struggled with this for a long time, is because this as human beings is that we look towards family and friends for validation, that we're doing things that we're supposed to be doing, right? Or acceptance, I should say, even. And I've been there for a good part of my life. In fact, it wasn't until 6 years ago, really, when I realized that, fuck it, I'm doing what I want to do. This is my life. Not even my wife, not even my kids, not even my parents, nobody.
I wish more men would do that. That's amazing.
But it wasn't always that way, Stephanie. It wasn't always that way, because I was always so afraid. And coming from an Eastern European background, it was like, no, entrepreneurship is not something you should be doing. Go to fucking college, Ivan. Well, I dropped out of college, then suddenly ended up making more money than the people that went to college. They got more debt than I do now.
Right. And are they even doing that for a living? Probably not. So they chose logic over what their heart was saying. And this is a big part of what I teach, is we all have a blueprint within our heart. All of them. If we honor that blueprint and we just trust step by step, we are shown the way. 100%. But it's about choosing love over fear, which is, again, the emotions. That first marriage that you mentioned, really look at everything that she taught you. She taught you how to love yourself more. She taught you how to own your power. She taught you. Now, did she know she was teaching all this? Probably not.
No.
When you really look at it from a higher perspective, and you really look at this place as the school that it truly is, because this is not your first go around. This is not my first go around. You came back to do things right. That's the ultimate act of love. That's a soul connection. And anybody who you feel strongly about, whether it's positively or whether it's negatively, they're a soulmate, and they're here to teach you something, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to engage with them on a daily basis, but it's a pretty amazing thing. You wouldn't be the person that you are today had you not encountered that person. You may be somebody who doesn't serve you today had you not gone through that experience.
That's a really good point. In fact, now that we're speaking about this, is that there's been moments where I've thought about, okay, should I just text her and say thank you for that experience? Because, my first wife couldn't give two shits, honestly, and still doesn't. But the more I thought about it, is like, I think it's an act of gratitude on my part, because what I've realized is that you're absolutely right. If you hadn't been for that experience, I would have never become the person that I am today. And now I'm in a much better place than I ever have been, in my entire life. But even so, I know that there's one thing that I've learned the hard way, is to be a continuous lifelong learner. And this is probably the best lesson that I can share to anybody. Whatever it is you're trying to do, whether you're trying to build a business or be happier in life, but have a happier marriage or, relationship with your kids, is just be a lifelong learner. Know that you can always learn something new. And mind you, that wasn't the case for me, because I either listened to other people or my ex-wife, or what's the world telling me to do. And that's why, I mean, speaking of when I told you dropping out of college, which mind you, I would have been the first one in my family to graduate college. Talk about high expectations, right? Of
Yeah.
that, like huge fucking expectations. And then,
Huge.
yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about, the love and fear, because, what's really key about that is that I don't think a lot of people understand how much the mental state that you're in can impact, and emotional, I should say, as well, can impact the trajectory of everything you do in
Everything.
life, in business, in relationships. So when it comes to love and fear, when you work with people, how do you advise them on, okay, they have fear. Most people do have fear. Well, especially in the United States, where most Americans, I think 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. If you don't have fear, I know they have fear because they're always worried about how they're going to pay their bills or put food on the table or keep the lights on. So how do you work? How do you help people overcome that fear hurdle?
We go back to the child within. We go back to the little boy or the little girl that's inside. I do all kinds of exercises. We basically get back in touch before you remember who you are before everyone told you who to be.
Yeah.
Right? When we do that, we go through a series of reprogramming, and we typically realize, whether it's a man or a woman who I'm working with, we realize that the pattern that keeps repeating, the anxiety, the resentment, the anger, the jealousy, the insecurities, all that came from typically an experience that they had when they were a kid, or a very destructive, toxic relationship that they experienced, right? So I teach people how to be true to their heart. And a lot of times when people hear follow your heart, they associate it with a person. That's not it at all. It's about being true to the little girl or the little boy inside of you. Then when you're sitting in that place of wholeness, then you're ready to attract what's meant for you, right? Because you're more balanced emotionally. You're back to that place, like I was saying earlier, of 0 point, which is the point of creation.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of reprogramming, a lot of shifting, and, love and fear. Again, it goes back to the emotions. Are you choosing to be angry today? Sure, that person cut you off in traffic, and yeah, you can sit there and call them a piece of shit, and that mother, you can do that all day long. But your energy, and the more you realize that you're an energetic being, and that whatever you send out to the universe is exactly what the universe is going to deliver you back, you become more conscious of what you're putting out there. And so what I typically recommend to the people who I work with, shift that shit. Shift it in 15 minutes or less. Get yourself to a place where the thing that used to trigger you for a week triggers you for a day. What triggered you for a day triggers you for a couple hours, a couple minutes. If you can become a master energy shifter, you can move from fear to love quickly, very quickly, and it becomes a pattern. And it takes a while to do this because you're unlearning everything that you learned growing up. And it's not just, we won't go too much into this, but it's not just this life. This is your pattern as a soul. You're unlearning things and relearning again. And it all starts with, affirmations, or going, you know what? I don't have to stay in this. I'm sad. I'm depressed. I'm angry. I'm this. I'm that. I'm feeling insecure.
Yeah.
Great. Use it as the indicator that it is, and then make the conscious decision to shift it.
Yeah. That's so powerful you said that. And it's ironic because last night I took my kids over to see grandma and grandpa, my parents, and we had a quick dinner. And my dad asked me if I wanted a beer 3 times. Now, mind you, I come from a family that, from a heritage where we eat 5 times in the course of a day, and dinner is about 5 hours because we bullshit and socialize for 5 hours after dinner's over. So when my dad asked me 3 times, I said, Dad, I haven't drank beer in like 8 or 9 months. I just drink a lot of water now, and I'll drink some soda occasionally, but not even as much. but it's all hard stuff. Now, he kind of looked at me like in disappointment. I'm like, I made that shift because I've made it a priority to better my health and my nutrition. And trust me, I've struggled for years with it. But when I'm in pursuit of that and I'm consistent with it, my mental cognition, my focus, my clarity, I've been a cyclist for 8 years. That's my mental therapy, like practicing more of these things. I'm finding peace inside of myself. I'm finding, like you said, holiness. I'm finding, getting closer to God and being more appreciative about, my kids, who there's an entire story behind them because they're IVF kids. There was a point in time over a course of several years that all I wanted to do, because after I met my second wife, all we wanted to do is have kids. We knew we were a perfect match, but God was like, you know what? I'm going to help you, but I ain't going to do it for you. You got to figure out a way. And
you definitely learned faith through that experience.
I think so.
Which is, you learned how to choose love over fear. You surrendered.
Yeah.
Which is the ultimate, consciousness shifter. It really is.
That's really powerful. Okay. So I want to put you on the spot here because I know I mentioned this before we hit record. But, I was curious because, someone like you has immense talent, well, gifts. They're not talents, they're gifts, I think, to where you have the ability to feel the energy that people have. I think that's really important. And so I have to ask you of the energy that you feel right now in this conversation, the energy that you think I might be projecting. And this is completely non-biased. I'm just curious because
you're totally fine. You're totally fine. So immediately I'm drawn to your root chakra and your solar plexus, which means that you are being moved through a rebirth. You're an overthinker and you make things harder on yourself than they need to be. Okay. I'm drawn very much to your heart, which means that you are actually going through the process of healing your heart. You need to let your past go.
Yeah.
Replaying things over and over and over and over again is why things worked out the way they did, or why it doesn't serve. Okay. Keeps you from manifesting new things. I really want to encourage you to stay in your creativity. You are on to something here with this podcast. And I don't know what it is about you and men, but if there's some way that you are to help enlighten men, when we were talking about that earlier, and you're having these ideas, do it. Do it. Go for it. Do men's retreats, do soul retreats, do whatever, teach. There's a reason that you've always felt different. I find you to be incredibly empathic as well. Stop worrying. I'm being shown again and again that you are a consistent worrier. And that is something that you're recreating patterns for yourself. And I'm, throughout the entire conversation, I see all this clarity that you're having around either this podcast or whatever this new stuff is. You gotta let go of the fear or the worry that you're wrong or the doubt that you're wrong. Don't try to force stuff. Surrender and watch how the universe just brings people to you, or brings, love and fear don't live in the same place. So when you're in that place of anxiety and worry, the opportunities that I can feel you wanting so much are repelled. They're repelled energetically. You surrender and you go, I let go, let God. I'm going to take action on my divinely inspired ideas. Watch how the universe offers you a book deal or offers you the opportunity to be on a podcast. That's how it works.
First of all, I want to thank you for that, because you hit the nail on the head with that one. And I'll tell you why, because we actually just signed on a new client that we're working with starting this Monday. And it's someone that I work out with every weekend. But how all of this started was after a workout, me and him actually got into a conversation about spirituality, because he had he calls it a demonic experience a couple of years ago that literally made them relive a dream that he had while he was awake. And basically it felt like he was being electrocuted, and he hasn't been able to escape that. So ever since, he's been having, God versus evil kind of challenges right? And it wasn't about that he doesn't believe that God exists, because I asked him point blank. It's just he's looking for more perspective and answers. So anyway, me and him were chatting for an hour. And one thing that he said is, he said, I've never really connected with anybody like this, especially a guy. Like, I've never had this kind of a deep conversation. I said, dude, like, I'm just fucking talking with you here, dude. Like, from the heart. Like, there's no agenda here. I'm just talking to you literally because I just give a shit. Literally, I just give a shit. And I want to help you. I want to give you some perspective, some insight. Whether you acknowledge it, whether you honor it, that's totally up to you. But I'm here to listen. And like a few days after that, I mean, of course, it snowballed, working together. But it's like, man, like those conversations. I mean, we were on the phone for 2 hours one day, just talking. And so what you were just saying is 100% spot on. And I think it's us to the fact, and for anybody watching and listening too, is just that, to just really be yourself. That's probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. And I think too many people are afraid to be themselves because they're afraid of being judged.
How freaking scary it was for me to come out and say I'm a psychic medium and I'm here to help people awaken.
Really?
That was the most terrifying thing in the world for me to experience. To actually because I was conditioned to believe that there was something wrong for me for so long. And when I tell people that I'm a psychic medium, number one, it usually freaks them out. Well, not so much anymore, but in the beginning they go, oh God. And they think, oh God, can she read my thoughts? And it's not even like that. Okay. It's something that, religious conditioned beliefs, and it's programmed people to believe that somebody like myself could be evil, when in all reality, somebody like myself just understands the wisdom of the heart, and understands the power of the heart. And not everybody loves that. They go, oh, you have to go to the church for this, or you have to go to this for this, and you have to go to that for that. It's absolutely ridiculous. You have everything that you need to know inside of you. And men in particularly are so conditioned from the time that they're little boys not to feel. And it's absolutely ludicrous. So the reason that you yourself have probably always felt so different is you're emotional.
I am. It's absolutely true. And so speaking of spirituality, one thing I did want to mention, because I mentioned this to Mike, actually, is because, he actually got his wife and his kids to go to church. And now, like, he's one that doesn't go. And one thing that I told him, I said, well, first of all, I asked him, I said, Mike, do you believe that God exists? He said, yes. I said, then you do believe in your heart. That's the first thing. But then one thing that we talked about is said, well, God wants you to be the best version of yourself. And church is really, and God and religion is about, unity and community. So I think it was really a misconception. But when I said that to him, is that those feelings, those emotions, that perspective that suddenly start to fill these voids for people. Because I know you're absolutely right. I mean, especially when I was younger, I was very emotional. And it's because I was very connected to other people's pain points or my own pain points or experiences, literally everything. And I thought that was fucking abnormal because I'm a guy. Like, a guy's not supposed to feel that way. A guy's not supposed to express himself. Like, we're supposed to deal with our own fucking shit and figure it out. Like, that was the masculine mentality of the male ego, so to speak. And you know what? It made me numb. It really did. It made me numb to the point where you said something earlier in the episode. You said, digging in deep to really find out, that the little boy, that little girl, I don't even know who the little boy is anymore. I've forgotten.
Right. But you were born that way. And this is what I always tell people who are very combative, because I guarantee there will be somebody who's listening to this going, oh my gosh, they're very religious, or they're conditioned, or however it is that this is the thing. I'm not saying that going to church isn't good. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, don't give your power over to people. That's what I'm saying, because you are a child of God. You have the same abilities as one of your children would have that you have. So God is a creator. He's a miracle maker, or he, she, however it resonates for you. Okay.
Right.
Why would you not have those same abilities that God has? You're a child of God. Just like your daughter would be, if you're a creative, your daughter may have creative abilities. You have the same type of gifts. And if you just get quiet enough to listen and honor that wisdom of the heart. I don't know how I know, I just know. How did you know that your wife was the woman for you? Your mind didn't know, you felt it. Yeah. You knew that there was something that the two of you were meant to do and align with. And up to that point, everything started to make sense as to why the first marriage didn't work out, as to where you were in that life. It was all heart wisdom, which is what's given to you by God.
It's funny you were talking about a second marriage, because it's my wife's second marriage, because in her first marriage, her ex-husband cheated on her in the first year that they were together. And so now that we've been together for, 11 years together, married for 6, that sometimes she jokes, because my wife can have moments of uncertainty, because I think it's that past experience that still kind of from the depths of the unknown arises, and she feels it. But when she thinks back to it, I said, look, if that hadn't happened, so my response to her is, if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be together. Literally. There's a reason why things happen.
Honestly. Everything happens for a reason. There are no coincidences. Not at all. There really aren't, and same kind of thing that I would say, like what I said to you earlier, is, thank God that happened, because he taught her worth. And she needs to maintain that sense of solid self-worth. And I don't mean anything by this, but the women that I coach, I tell them all the time, what if he does cheat? Are you going to lose your shit? Is your whole world going to come falling down? Yeah. No, you have to maintain a sense of self-worth to where you go, okay, if that's what you want, that's what you want. I'm not sticking around for that. But there you go. There's a lesson in it. So with her, just keep reminding her how much you love her, and have her work on that solid sense of self-worth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And one thing that you said about self-worth, actually, that reminds me, is I remember after my high school days, probably I spent a 10-year period where, there was issues with self-confidence and self-esteem and self-worth, but I wanted to put blame, because of what I experienced, rather than, ditch that shit and move on. So 10 years of my life literally was carrying around anger, hatred, and seeking justice, and thought that was going to make me feel better,
And that's exactly why I teach people not to choose fear over love, because you don't start aligning with a more abundant life until you can forgive, until you can let go. Yeah. That's something that is a game changer.
Love takes a lot more. And I think a lot of people, the definition of love is, I think, very misconstrued in modern society. I think when you say love, it's probably just affection, from two people usually. And love has a much greater meaning, right?
Love is freedom. It's unconditional. When you really love somebody, you let them go. You heal the pattern. I loved my ex-husband very, very much. Yeah. The pattern wasn't serving us anymore, right? Didn't mean that, we weren't still attached. There was a lot of work that had to be done through the attachment, right? Yeah. Same kind of thing with other people in my life. When you love somebody, the weak are the ones who stay angry. The people who can actually forgive, that doesn't mean forget, but are willing to release people of the emotional debt that they owe you. Those are the ones who align with more abundance, with more love. It's all energy and vibration, all of it. But that's a whole nother conversation.
No, I love that. And again, as you said earlier, is this, I think those deep thoughts that you just alluded to, with your ex-husband specifically, and the feelings that you went through, and letting go because you knew that there was no longer alignment. But you said it actually earlier, because that was something when I was younger that I knew I had, because I am that person who absolutely loves deep conversations, because I think it helps people release so much. Like, and you'd be fucking surprised at how much shit people hold on to. Literally, like how much stuff that's like, why in the hell are you even holding on to this? Like, does it even, like, what purpose does it serve?
Again, they don't know how to connect with themselves. And that's why I was telling you earlier about how important it is to get back in touch with that little girl and little boy. Who were you before the trauma? And that's who you truly are.
Yeah.
And if you can be true to her or him every single time, you're winning. You're winning. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or says. You're winning. The universe will support you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, I absolutely enjoyed the conversation. And in respect of time, before we wrap up, though, tell viewers, listeners, how can they find you? How can they connect with social handles, websites, anything you can think of?
Sure. Thank you so much. I've loved this. You're amazing. DivineSoulJourney.net is my website, and I'm most active on IG. I just got a Clubhouse. I'm trying to figure that all out. Like everything, it's like, man, if you're not on Clubhouse, you need to be on this. If you don't on this, you need to be on this. It's like, my God, it's exhausting. But I'm most active over on IG and my website. So
awesome. Well, Stephanie, I want to thank you so much. I mean, this is probably one of the most heartfelt episodes that I've done with the podcast in the 6 years running now.
Oh, wow.
And so I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.